Welcome back, Flyers Nitty Gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Wolok, my partner in crime, as always, Vasili Gianarakos. Vasili, what's going on, bro?
I'm doing well, but I mean, in terms of Flyers news, obviously nothing happening or anything like that,
Yeah,
nothing to talk about. But in all seriousness, it's pretty great for us in the summer months like this to get some topics to talk about that are Flyers related that usually you really wouldn't get these types of things and types of news coming out like at this point late in the off season. So for us and the fact that we're doing a podcast here, it makes it awesome for us. So I'm excited for the show, excited to kind of break down that Ryan Johansson news and what's going on there. How you
yeah.
doing, Yariv?
I'm doing well, buddy. Yeah, it's been a very interesting offseason. Not all good news, but all interesting news. Some of it we still don't really know, like Kolosov, we do have like a minor update there. But I even saw this clip of Bruce Boudreau. Like the Flyers are relevant again, especially with Mitchkov now coming over here. Like the Flyers are becoming a more relevant team again. They are kind of a team making headlines on a regular basis, whether good or bad now. That is kind of more like the old Flyers, whether good or bad. And I even saw like Bruce Boudreau was talking about how he expects the Flyer. He's like he has the Flyers as one of his wild card teams. He's like, I don't know. He's like, I think they will be in the playoff hunt again. So it's like a lot of the negativity that's kind of swirled this team for the past several years. It's still there. It hasn't completely gone away, but like all of a sudden, like we're relevant. We have young talent now on the large scale media stage, and it's interesting. I wonder, how things will evolve, and will the Flyers by this time next year be one of the biggest stories in the NHL? Because if we talked about their upcoming draft and what they're doing. They clearly have some kind of plan. It seems like they're being more aggressive about it, and we're going to talk about that. That there is something happening here, and it's exciting. We get the fact that we have this much to talk about right now, with what probably 3 weeks left until real relevancy, maybe September 10th. I
Yeah.
think that's the opening of
It's
rookie camp.
surprising for me, but it just shows the progress kind of being made within the organization
Right,
to kind of bring the team back into a sphere where, hey, the Flyers aren't that afterthought anymore, right? It
right.
seems like, teams do have to be aware of what they're doing, what they're trying to plan to do for the future, and how they're building the team. So I think, like I've been saying all along, like Briere and Jones seem to have a plan. It hasn't seemed to stray from what that initial plan is. And I think they're doing a good job executing so far to the best of their ability, anyhow.
Yeah. And I actually, this is like not a topic we have. And before I get into the sponsors and all that stuff, I will say I actually started going through on Puckpedia. Shout out to Puckpedia. I started going through all of the projected lineups around the league. I will say, I think maybe this is the beginning, and I think we'll see more of this next year, of the shift around the league, where a lot of the better teams in the league will start taking a step back, and a lot of those teams that were kind of middling or were really bad will start kind of working their way up the standings. I think this is going to be a very competitive year throughout the entire NHL, vastly more competitive than last year. Even there is no like clear cut worst team in the NHL like there was last year. I think we're going to see a lot more competition, and then things trending into another direction. As the Flyers get better, I think other teams that have kind of been middling are also going to be getting better. And some of these top tier teams that haven't drafted a bunch of young players over the past few years will have a more difficult time kind of dominating the same way they used to. I think we're kind of on the precipice of that, but
Yeah, there's
we'll
always a
see.
shift like that. I mean, it's not even just in hockey, but like in sports in general, it's very cyclical. So, you have your top teams that might stay in those like top positions for
Sure.
4 or 5 years, but then that shifts out. Those older players start to get older that maybe were contributing at such a high level. And then you have some other up and coming teams have prospects filter in and they take that next step.
Yeah.
So it's interesting and it's going to be fascinating to see what teams do take that step and what top teams kind of take that step back, right?
Yeah, and we talked about it in last week's episode, like where the Flyers are in their age is a bunch of guys waiting to break out. Potentially, they
Yeah.
won't all break out, but if some of them break out, the Flyers are a very different team, and they're not the only team in that position Buffalo is another team kind of sitting in that territory where they have a bunch of guys in their mid early 20s that are looking to make a jump. So once that stuff starts happening, things will start shifting. Maybe not, it's not going to be 100% flip of the board, but if, 10 teams all of a sudden get better over the next 2 years that were not very good over the past, the past previous 5 years, all of a sudden we're having a different conversation. We're going to talk about Montreal, who's obviously trying to be aggressive. All right, let me do the sponsorship thing and then we can get into all the news. So just want to remind everybody, please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. That is a humongous help to us. The best way to support our show here specifically. Obviously, check out our website, flyersnittygritty.com, but subscribe to us here. Hit the notification bell for notifications. You can go to Spotify and iTunes for the audio versions. Please give us a follow there as well, and also give us a rating there if you can. That is also a great way to support us. But again, Vasili and I look at subscribers the most on YouTube. That's not the only way to support us, but it is huge to us. So if you're listening or watching and you have not subscribed, please do so. And also want to give a shout out to our sponsors. We have Jim Steaks, 4th and South, one of the best cheesesteaks in Philadelphia, if not the best cheesesteak in Philadelphia. Go to Jim Steaks. They are reopened at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak. And also Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Go to them for all your insurance adjustment needs. Use them as a weapon against your insurance companies to keep them honest. Again, Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. And also just want to give a brief shout out to our new sponsor, but also our current sponsor, Sports Spider. Sports Spider, if you guys are tired of the latest articles, videos, and podcasts from around the web. If you're tired of looking all around the web for your latest articles, podcasts, and everything from around the web, go to them for your aggregated Philadelphia Flyers content. If you want to stay as up to date as possible on the Philadelphia Flyers, on the NHL in general, they have everything there for you. They have your podcasts, all the articles. Again, our articles are kind of pinned to the top. Our video articles are pinned to the top as well. We do get priority there, but they do support all of the Philadelphia outlets. So make sure to go there. It'll save you kind of one step from having to search the web. And again, if you find our articles through their site, they still get credit, and that actually helps support our sponsorship. If you go to them and then go to our site from there, it actually benefits both parties. So don't hesitate to use them at all. So again, sportspider.com. The link is in the description. All right, let's get in the first bit of news. This one's kind of it's not really Flyers news, but just want to give a shout out to the Konecny family. He did have, a great offseason, getting a brand new contract with a massive initial year that he will be paid out next year, which is a $12 million a year salary, which again averages to 8.75 or whatever over the 8 years. But Travis Konecny's family, they actually had a fire in their house. They were not home. Nobody was seriously injured. Apparently, 2 firemen did have some kind of burn marks from fighting the fire. I don't know the severity of the fire, but definitely want to wish them the best. I'm sure they have insurance. We know he has the money to take care of it, but still unfortunate news. It's unfortunate when it happens to anyone, but obviously unfortunate for Konecny. Probably a headache he does not want to deal with as he ramps up into the season. So hopefully their house is okay, and that it doesn't really hinder their kind of living situation, because they do have 2 very young children in the house as well. Anything you want to add there?
Yeah, you just have to hope there's no like crazy structural damage or anything like really hurting the foundation of their home. Nobody wants to, hear about somebody's home potentially being on fire or losing their house in any way. Nobody wants to go through that. So just prayers out to him, his family. Thankfully, nobody was there when anything happened, and it's just really the house that caught the damage here. Obviously, the firemen as well with some burns, but hopefully they're okay. So just thoughts and prayers out to Konecny and his family, and to the fire department as well that helped out. But hopefully it's nothing too serious.
Yeah, dude. It's really good they weren't home. I mean, maybe they could have stopped it, at the same time, but we don't know the severity. But I'm just glad nobody was hurt, and property can be replaced. And again, I almost certain that they have insurance, so I'm sure that he won't have to pay, out of pocket or anything to get his home fixed. But good thing the guy's got the money for it too. Good thing he signed that new contract.
It's gonna come in
Um,
handy for sure.
yeah, so wish them the best, and hopefully it's not a distraction for him during the season too. Okay, let's get into the big piece of news. There are some other cool things to talk about today, more exciting stuff. But I would say this is kind of exciting. If you're kind of a hardcore fan, and I imagine you are because you're listening to this podcast, especially in the off season. Yeah, there is a big news of information that just came out. So we've been talking about the Flyers cap situation and how they're up against the cap. Currently, right now, they're 830,000 over the cap, assuming that again Ryan Ellis is on the roster, Ryan Johansen's on the roster, Nick Delorier will be on the roster, Eric Johnson signing here. So with the two injuries and obviously the big Matvey Michkov coming over. Now, for those of you not aware, we have explained this before. While the Flyers can leverage long-term injury reserve to get under the cap, there is a penalty that comes with that. It's essentially a cost that accrues throughout the season, and then you have cap penalties that apply to next year. So the Flyers. So going back, the Flyers traded for Ryan Johansen in the Sean Walker trade. They did receive a first-round pick for taking on all of the 50% contract that Colorado was responsible for. The other 50% is owned by Nashville. They did take that on hand with Ryan Johansen. They made it very clear they did not want Ryan Johansen on the team. He does have a history with John Tortorella, not a great one. Johansson did say he was willing to put all that behind him, but the Flyers' plan seemed to be the entire time that they were going to send him to the minors. And then from there, it can be assumed that they were probably either looking to trade him, which nobody was biting, even though they were offering to trade him at a 50% retention. I think the guy's reputation is pretty much in the gutter, and that will be more obvious throughout this story. And then I think their ultimate goal was probably to buy him out, because I think they knew they were going to be up against the cap, and they were trying to find ways to save cap space in the immediate, because you do not want to leverage LTIR, which is why I was talking a few weeks back about potentially sending Nick Delorier down to the minors, just finding ways to get underneath that LTIR cap space situation that they did not want to get stuck in. The recent development, as the Flyers made an announcement, as we record this is Wednesday, they made it on Tuesday, that the Flyers have decided to call out Johnson for a breach of contract, have put him through unconditional waivers for the purpose of a contract termination. So this is not the same as a buyout. They would not be responsible for the money, assuming that the termination is not disputed. That will not happen. The termination will be disputed. Vasili, let me go through this whole thing, and then I'll let you respond to it first.
Sure.
Ryan Johansen is represented by Kurt Overhart, ironically the same agent that represents Cutter Gauthier. This is KO Sports. They have responded publicly saying that Ryan Johansen has an surgery up and coming. That they were hoping the Flyers wouldn't do something like this, and they're upset that they decided to go this route. Anyway, it does lead to the NHLPA most likely will work with KO Sports to dispute this in some form or another. They will have 60 days from the day that this was done, so they have 60 days to file a dispute. It might last longer than that. Historically, it does not typically last longer than 60 days. As of right now, the Flyers will have the cap space, but there probably be some kind of settlement talk. We can discuss that. Vasili, I'll let you react to that first. But so as everybody's aware, right now he is not on the Flyers roster anymore. There is going to be some hesitancy. We'll talk about what the Flyers are going to be doing with that cap space, but I will start off with this. That cap space is not being freed to make up and to account for some kind of addition or big move that the Flyers are making. This was always to get under the cap, and the scenario would be if there is a settlement and it's a settlement that the Flyers will have to take a 1.6 or 1.4%. I think actually $1.6 million cap hit, which would be his buyout number. Uh, that would bring them under the cap anyway, and that's really what the Flyers are looking to do, and that allows you to bank cap space moving forward. If they win the fight altogether, which we can go over the case, then they wouldn't owe anything, and then they can accrue lots of cap space, and then maybe as the season goes on, they can add somebody later. But do not expect a move done by this immediately. Okay, Vasili, I talked a lot there. Go ahead.
No problem. That was an awesome breakdown, Yariv. Yeah, I think for the Flyers and just what they're trying to do here, obviously the perspective is all about the salary cap and making sure
Yeah.
they can enter the season under that cap floor, not having to tap into LTIR. Like you said, if you do tap into that LTIR, you're not accruing cap space any longer on a daily basis. And with the way the Flyers cap situation is kind of aligned right now, that's not something they want to do. And the main thing is probably Matvei Michkov because he has bonuses. Chances are, if you look at the way he's performed in the KHL, he's probably going to hit those bonus metrics. And if he does, the Flyers are going to need to pay that bonus at the end of the season. And that's where banking the cap space on a day-to-day basis comes into play and comes to fruition. Because if they are not able to do that, then they're going to have to carry likely bonus overages because they won't have the space or the cap space set aside through the accrual on a daily basis of being able to pay him at the end of the season, right? So if they were to bank that, if they were like to use LTIR for whatever reason and not bank that money, it'd be a situation where you're kind of kicking the can down the road and having to kind of pay these bonus overages and add them onto your cap for next season or even maybe down the line, right? So that's something obviously you want to avoid. But yeah, just to get into more of it and like a timeline and kind of just the interesting situation at play because you really don't see this happening often, especially in hockey. Like usually when players claim an injury, when have you ever seen a team like dispute that injury or kind of say that it's not a valid thing? Like I don't think
Definitely not the Flyers,
yeah,
right?
exactly. Because we've seen this multiple times in the past with players that have been injured, but even not just the Flyers, like other teams in general, I don't really think I've seen this from. So it's kind of like a one-off situation here. And it's one of the first situations I've really seen like this cover, like not covering the league, but just following the league for years and years at this point. So that's what is the most interesting to me. And then if you look at just like the reasoning behind it. So just to clarify, like a material breach is when a player proceeds to conduct an activity in violation of said contract. So this could be actions or behaviors which raises red flags. In this case, that pertains to Johansson's injury. So obviously there's some sort of evidence or something pointing to the fact that sure, Johansson's claiming that he's injured and he can't play. But the Flyers seem to think that's not the case. So I'm sure there's going to be some sort of evidence brought to the forefront when this all like comes to a head and the grievances are filed and things are kind of brought to an arbitration situation and a settlement gets worked on here. So just to add as well, Elliot Friedman stated today that Johansson cleared waivers, which is a no-brainer. The Flyers can now terminate his contract, but we'll see how this continues over the next few weeks. He has 60 days from the date of termination to appeal. So officially, technically, the contract is terminated. Obviously, we know that with KO Sports and Johansson's camp and who represents him and Kurt Overhart, that they're going to appeal the termination. They're going to file a grievance. They don't believe that's the case. They obviously believe that Johansson's injured and, he's entitled to the money that he should be paid out in this point, because the thing is with the contract terminated, he's not getting paid, right? So that's the main thing from him. He's not going to be getting his money in this situation. So I think it's really just an interesting scenario because like I personally believe that it's probably likely, if you just look at all the tea leaves, that Johansson might not want to play in the AHL at this point, right? I think that's kind of the main factor here that we have to take into consideration. If you look at what happened and kind of the timeline, like the Flyers around last year's trade deadline, they obviously trade Sean Walker to Colorado. They take Ryan Johansson back to get that first round pick and secure that, along with, Colorado getting Walker in return. And the funny, well, not the funny thing, but the crazy thing here is that, essentially a day before he's traded, I'm pretty sure, the night before he was traded, The Avalanche play the Minnesota Wild, and he did not miss a shift in that 2-1 win over the Wild the Avalanche had. Then he gets traded. And from what we've seen and what we've kind of heard, the initial thing was that the Flyers wanted to send him to the AHL. Johansson just said, I know there's been problems with Tortorella in the past, but like I'm willing to work through those and like report and be a good soldier and kind of finish out the remainder of his contract with the Flyers. And the Flyers said they didn't really want him around the team. They didn't want him around the locker room for whatever reason. There seems to be some sort of character issues or locker room issues. I mean, if you look at just the history, he went from Nashville. They didn't really want, or he went from Columbus. They traded him to Nashville. He was there on Nashville for multiple seasons. Seems like Nashville didn't want him around due to those locker room issues. Goes to Colorado, was there for half a season. And there was rumblings at the time that the locker room didn't want him or his attitude around. So it kind of puts the writing of the wall if there's some sort of character type of issues. And then, as Johansson states that he's willing to play for the Flyers kind of say, we'd rather pass on that. And we'd like to send you to the AHL. And if you think about it from Johansson's perspective, he's getting paid $8 million. A team is paying him $4 million to not want to play for them in Nashville. And then the team you got traded to also doesn't want you. And then the team that trades you in Colorado to get rid of your character issues also doesn't want you. So it's pretty embarrassing for him to have all these teams that just don't seem to want him at this value. And also the fact that, I mean, it just seems like he doesn't want to play in the AHL. So that's the thing for me where it's kind of fishy. And that's probably where the evidence comes in for the Flyers that you think, 2 days before we traded for you, you were playing for the Avalanche in a game like almost 14, 15 minutes a night. I think he played 63 games this season in the NHL and wasn't showing really any signs of hurt or being injured. So it's kind of puzzling that once the Flyers reveal, hey, no, we don't want you on our main roster, we want to send you down to the AHL, then this, mystical injury comes to fruition from Johansson's camp where he's apparently hurt and all that. Apparently it's a hip injury. That's the claim. But like when you look at kind of the situation, how it unfolded, it seems like if the Flyers were going to play him in the NHL, I think Johansson would be healthy at this point. But the fact that he, would be sent to the AHL here, it seems like he doesn't want to kind of go from that NHL lifestyle to riding the bus in the minor leagues or, having to be an AHL player at this point in his career. It just doesn't seem like something that he's interested in doing. And that seems to be what's happening, right? So the NHLPA is going to represent Johansson's case where he'll file a grievance here, most likely in the next 60 days. Then we'll see what evidence the Flyers have against Johansson and kind of why they believe his contract could be terminated based on whatever evidence that is that they bring forth. But to me, like, I don't see how or why the Flyers would try to terminate his contract in this way if they didn't have sufficient evidence to back their claim up that he actually isn't legitimately injured,
Yeah.
right? I just don't see the point. So we'll see what happens with the grievance. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if this comes to some sort of settlement where the Flyers are like, hey, we'll pay you like a 1.5, $2 million, like half of what the cap hit is for this year. And then you're kind of off the books after that. And it's strange too, because if the contract gets terminated, Nashville's off the hook for the $4 million they owe, so they're probably in the Flyers' corner as well here. But there's a lot of moving parts. This is probably a first time situation I've ever really seen anything like this happen over an injury.
Yeah, it apparently, and this is a shout out to Charlie O'Connor. He's got really good information about this on his podcast he did with Bill Matz today. I almost said Meltzer. So definitely check out their podcast as well. I don't want to take anything away because I did learn a few things from listening to Charlie's read of it. He does great research. So I would recommend that show as well. Yeah, I mean, to add a couple more things. One, when you look at the character issue dispute, also, you mentioned that he played the day before. He was also at morning skate the day he got traded. So it's not like he got injured in that game or something. You look at the character issues and the fact that he's not humble enough to be like, and I thought about this a lot. I was like, the fact that you're not humble enough to be like, okay, people are doubting me right now. I still have an additional year here. I'm going to prove them wrong. I'm going to go to the minors and I'm going to crush it. And I'm going to help this young team who they could have used him in the playoffs if they were assuming they would actually allow him to play. Like maybe he kind of heard that he wouldn't be playing in the minors too. That possibility is there too. But I would be like, hey, look, guys, I'm going to do whatever you want me to do. Try to change your fate and be like, I am a team guy.
That's what I mean. Doesn't
He
that kind of point that out? Like if he was to do that, that
right
kind of rehabilitates his character in a
his
sense,
image.
where this
Yes.
almost further degrades it.
Right.
So
Yeah, he pulled the lever that he thought. And by the way, for those who are not aware, you do not have to pay into escrow if you're in the AHL. So he actually would have been paid more money
yeah,
if he would have gone down to the AHL.
exactly.
He would have got a higher salary because he wouldn't have to pay into escrow, and escrow is pretty sizable percentage of your contract. So he would have made more money. And he was trying to force the Flyers' hand here into not being able to do anything about it. Now, while they said they have a um, they have this surgery scheduled. Why did you wait so long?
If you've
Like
been
it seemed
hurt, yeah,
because the
exactly.
season is starting now. So your whole plan was to get this surgery during the season so you wouldn't have to play. The Flyers actually do have a case here. And for those who are unaware, the Flyers have to get permission for the NHL to do something like this, which means the NHL believes that they have a case. So for those assuming that, the Flyers are just trying to be bad guys here, I think they got caught. Look, it's a business, and they made a deal, and they assumed that they were going to be able to pull the levers that are afforded to them. Which, if they want to drop a guy to waivers who does not have a no movement clause, they're in the right to do that.
Yeah.
Now he could have negotiated a trade. They could have maybe even negotiated a buyout with him, which I think honestly they would have been somewhat open to that, and that would have got him 66% of his salary plus an opportunity to re-sign somewhere else the following year to make up for the money lost. But I think he knows his reputation is pretty low at this point around the NHL, and knows there are not really other
Many
options.
suitors,
And
yeah.
it doesn't seem like playing is at the top of his list. Now there is also information about him just getting married, and there were videos of him lifting his wife and dancing and all this stuff. He's not playing up the I'm injured thing. Like if you look at the Ryan Ellis situation, you look at the Cam Atkinson thing, like those guys' lives were heavily disrupted. It does not seem like your life is heavily disrupted. And I think they do have a case to make here. To your point, Vasili, I do think he probably will get some kind of settlement. I don't know what it'll be. I don't know what's going to happen with Nashville, and apparently there is zero precedent that nothing like this has ever
No, it
happened before
hasn't.
with a secondary team. But the way I kind of see it is that Nashville is still liable for 50% of that contract. They're the ones who gave him this contract. They're not going to be able to get out of it and get absolutely nothing. They will have to probably mimic whatever the Flyers have to go through as well. So they will be on the Flyers camp to try to fight this to get that settlement money as low as possible. But I think Johansson might have a difficult time actually making this and showing that he didn't breach contract because he didn't show up last year to the team at all. He publicly said he wouldn't go to camp, wanted to go to the AHL. Like you can point to multiple things to show that he was not acting in good faith.
Yeah.
And the Flyers are not doing anything wrong by waiving a guy and buying him out. That has happened to Cam Atkinson, who the Flyers respect immensely, who, again, because of his reputation, was able to find a new role in Tampa. I think Johansson knows that he probably won't be able to find a new role around the NHL. So he is just trying to get his payout before his career in the NHL probably ends.
I
Um,
agree.
if he
Yeah.
had a different attitude, I think his career wouldn't be ending. But this is obviously a problem. And again, this is another one of those examples where people think that John Tortorella is harsh on guys for no reason. He is not 100% accurate. I'll make that very clear. But most of the time that he calls out a player for being a bad fit, he's right. And this is one of those players, you know?
Yep.
And I don't think it, and I was listening to Charlie and Bill and how they were talking about like how the Flyers don't want to have a bad, too bad of a reputation with KO Sports because they're like the seventh largest in the league. They obviously have a bunch of other players. They actually represent Joel Farabee as well, even though it's not Kurt Overhard who represents them directly. But the way I see it too is like you are an agency. You are in charge of negotiating deals. You will have players coming to Philadelphia. You will have. They are also not in their best interest to create all of these problems. They will have to, again, work in their client's best interest. He will get something because he did have a contract.
Yeah.
But his actions over the past, let's say, I don't know, what is it, 5 months, 4
5, 6
months,
months. Yeah. Something
right?
like that.
have also led to the fact that now they have leverage over you. You thought you were being smart. Like that, in my opinion, I think that's what they were
Well,
thinking.
that's what I want to highlight, Yuri. Like, there's a couple more things I want to highlight here that I
Sure,
think
please.
are important. So if you look at the whole timeline of the situation, some people might wonder, well, why didn't the Flyers try to do this earlier? Why now? What's the reasoning? Because I think they're slowly trying to build up their evidence and build their case into that and this termination being a possibility, right? Like you already pointed out the fact that, hey, okay, look that he didn't, want to report to the AHL. A phantom injury occurs, a day after you're traded, after you find out that that's where you would have had to go to the AHL. And then, the evidence, whatever other evidence they've accrued since that point, and whether that be, the video evidence of him at his wedding and how he was moving around, but who
Right.
knows what other evidence they might have seen? Who knows if like other players have seen him trying to train or what else is going on? Like nobody knows, right? Like hockey's a tight knit circle, so you don't know kind of what they're hearing and what they're seeing in terms of Johansson and
Sure.
the injury and all of that. So I think that's a big factor as well, just to kind of look at. And then another thing too, that I wanted to mention, like to your point, like why not just go down, be a good soldier, kind of rehabilitate your image and try to come back.
The Flyers
Um,
need centers.
yeah, right. They need center. So it's a puzzling thing for me. I just think he probably sees the writing on the wall. Like at the trade deadline, it was rumored that the Flyers ate half of that 4 million cap hit or were willing to eat half of that, make him a $2 million player and tried to trade him at the deadline. And there was no takers for him even at $2 million. So he probably
Right.
thinks to himself, hey, like if I go into free agency, you bet I'm not signing for less than 2 million. Like he probably has that sort of maybe inflated ego if he's moving this way
Clearly.
in general. So you would imagine if he's thinking in his head, hey, no team wants you for 2 million. If I go to free agency and I'm bought out here by the Flyers, I'm not signing back with any team for less than that anyway. So he probably thinks to himself, I don't care about rehabilitating anything. To your point on what you stated earlier, Yariv, he's probably thinking, let me get this final, $8 million in this last year, make my money, and I'll retire and kind of get out of the game. Like
Yeah.
that's the way that it kind of looks for me, just based on everything and what's happening. And the last thing is the Overhart situation. I mean, this is one thing that I wouldn't say I'm concerned about it, but it's certainly becoming a trend where the Flyers are not having the greatest relationship with this agent, Kurt Overhart. Is that going to stop them down the line from potentially having relationships with players that are represented by this agency? Like, who's to say? Like, for example, Zeev Boyam was represented by Kurt Overhart,
Sure.
and the KO agency. Did the Flyers, operate in the sense that, hey, we don't want to deal with this Overhart guy, so let's pass on Boyam? I'm not going to say that that's the case, but we're not behind closed doors. We don't know the thinking. But if they are operating in that manner, I think they really have to get on top of this because you can't just blackball a whole agency and the
Correct.
players
Agreed.
associated with them. So I'm not saying that is the case, but like you do see an evolving trend here
Well,
with Overhart.
I will say it doesn't help the agency's reputation either because
No,
just
yeah,
the other teams are not like, yeah, they might be like, okay, it's not our problem, but when they look at your history and look at the issues you've created for other teams, like it hurts both sides, not
of
just the
course, yeah,
Flyers side.
agreed.
And I think the agency also needs to be aware of that they can't constantly have these drama queen players because teams will be, this is still hockey and teams don't like that. And we've seen that happen with other players. We'll talk about Patrick Laine, but we saw what happened with Laine. And like I'm hearing now that Laine's old teammates in Columbus, the ones that some of them moved on, didn't want Laine on the team. It's like you now have a reputation of having drama queen players that create problems for teams. Like you also don't want to be that agency either.
Exactly,
And
yeah.
I'm not saying they should throw their player under the bus. They're responsible to help him, so they are doing what's right by him. But you also don't want to build this reputation that your players will create problems for
Yeah.
NHL teams because other teams will be watching this as
And
well. So both sides should
I
try to walk away
agree.
with a repaired relationship over time.
And I think if you're
It
the
can't be a permanent thing. It
Flyers,
has to
I
be
think,
business.
yeah, I think if you're the Flyers here, that should be the main goal, like through this negotiation or settlement or whatever's kind of going on with the arbitrator that's going to happen here. Like the goal should be let's come to an agreement that both sides can kind of work with potentially. And then from that point, let's maybe kind of try to bury the hatchet because I would imagine for the Flyers, the last thing they want to do is, have, let's say, a Kurt Overhart or this agency, like specifically, not to say blackball them, but almost be like a almost be like a detractor of the Flyers in the sense that
Sure.
let's say you're in free agency now and the Flyers are trying to sign a big time free agent in 2 years. And let's say this free agent is represented by that agency and by this agent, Kurt Overhart, and you're getting similar offers, right? Like let's say the Flyers are offering, this player 8.5 million and the other team's offering, 8.5 million. The agency's probably going to say and recommend to their agent, don't go with the Flyers. I know these guys, they're not going to treat you the right way. So
There's also,
you want to
well,
repair that situation from if you're the Flyers, you don't want that advice giving or being given out to players that you're trying to
sure,
potentially pursue,
but
right?
it's also a double-edged sword, right? Because the player themselves be like, "Well, I want to sign in Philly, and they don't like you, so you're fired, and I'm going
So
to go to one of
you're
the
kind of you're fucking over my
because you can
negotiation.
fire exactly
Of
like
course,
it's
yeah.
a double-edged sword for them. So while a lot of people are like, "Oh my God, what was me Flyers?" The Flyers are the more powerful party in
Of
this,
course, they're an organization. They're the
right?
ones signing these players at the end of
Right.
the
They're the ones giving out the money.
yeah.
So they do have the leverage in this stuff. So I think Kurt Overhart also needs to be somewhat careful. I don't think he needs to kowtow to the Flyers consistently, but you also don't want, like I said, like think about if your players start building a reputation that where they go will create problems. Then
Well, the
all of a
team
sudden,
want
other
you, yeah.
teams are not going to want to sign you. And then look what happened with Sean Couturier, which he had one problem in the media with his agent.
And he
He's
changed
still at
things
this
up
team.
immediately.
He
Yeah.
changed agents. Like the players can do that too. Like if they're like, well, I want to stay in Philly and they don't like
Yeah,
you.
you're
I
like causing unnecessary
right.
drama. So
And if they're really good players, promise you the other six agencies that are ranked above Kurt Overhart, they will jump to grab
of
these other
course, of
contracts, right?
course.
So it's a double edged sword. I think I, ultimately what I think is probably going to happen is to make both parties happy and try to walk away with everybody not being pissed off is going back to the original purpose of the deal, which is you will be getting bought out. You are going to get that money. So you will get
Yeah.
1.6 million from Philly, 1.6 million from Nashville. You'll be getting each one of those payouts or whatever the cap hit ends up being,
Whatever they calculate anyway in the
which
settlement or come to an
I'm pretty
agreement
sure
on.
it's 1.6 million for over 2 years from each one
Yeah.
of them. So you get 3.2 million from each one of them,
We'll see
and
though.
you're a free agent.
We'll
I'm
we'll
just
see
guessing.
though. No, we'll see though in a sense because now that this isn't technically a buyout, I don't know if they have to structure it in that manner where
No,
it has
well,
to be over a 2 year period.
no,
So that's what I'm saying. So in a sense, like if you're the Flyers, this is actually even if you okay, the best case scenario for them is obviously to terminate the contract.
entirely.
There's a complete breach entirely, and then there's no cap hit accrued whatsoever from Johansson. Is that going to happen? I mean, I don't think that's the likeliest scenario, but it honestly depends on the evidence they have against him and what they're citing the breach to be. But my thought process is this. This is probably the best case scenario for a couple of reasons because now you avoid that buyout.
Well,
So
there's no
you're
downside really.
no, there's no downside, but now you avoid having to actually buy him out. And that would have for sure locked you in for 2 more years of a cap hit. Where in this settlement situation, this is kind of like unprecedented territory for the NHL and the NHLPA here. So there's no telling whether this settlement is going to be structured over 2 years or what the structure is going to be. So I'd imagine their goal would be to structure in a 1 year settlement type of buyout, and then you accrue whatever type of cap hit that is. And then from that point, you're not, having it drag on
Sure.
for a couple of years. So who knows?
To be honest with you, I would imagine Johansson would prefer the money up front also. Typically,
Most
if
people would, yeah.
right, exactly. It's interesting. That would give them about what 800K of savings.
Yeah.
If he would just report to the minors, they get 1.15 million in cap
And
saving.
he
That would
gets
get them
all
under
his
the cap.
money. Yeah.
Right. So it's like you've created all of these
For
problems.
yourself, essentially. And you're almost creating this situation where you're not going to get
Yes.
paid $8 million.
I
So
and I think that's a big reason why the NHL is incentivizing this is because they don't like this either. Like
yeah,
we can kind of read the writing on the wall here. Like you are playing this system,
pretty
right? And
much.
you were taking advantage of a good
Well,
faith system.
and that's what I kind of said earlier because I'm
Right.
like, when have we ever seen this happen before, right? Like usually the
I've never
NHL's
seen it happen.
the NHL's
Definitely not with
very
the Flyers.
the NHL's very lenient when it comes to player injuries and like the history surrounding that and kind of upholding
I mean, Ryan Ellis has
contracts.
played
Exactly.
4 games here and
And
has been injured ever
they have
since.
no issues with that contract, right? So like that's what I mean. I think there's like things that the NHL doesn't like that they see here. Like you're almost making a mockery of the system that we
We made
allow and
fun
give
of it.
a ton of faith to. Yeah, of course.
You and I made fun of it because we're like his injury. Like
In quotations.
there is clearly smoke behind this fire,
Like I
right?
agree with that.
Behind
Yeah.
his behavior and his character. And again, I don't know the guy. I could 100% be wrong here, but his actions and the fact he's been kind of pushed out of teams, not just traded like Mike Sillinger back in the day that went to 12 teams, but everybody loved him. Like a guy who the like people, and again, he had a Cam Atkinson like season last year. So, I'm sure, and I did hear this from Charlie O'Connor. This was a really nice piece of information there. Apparently, the Flyers, he did not avoid the Flyers doctors. So that is a credit to Johansson. He did get evaluated and they did find some form of injury there. But I would imagine, we don't know, but I would
Yeah.
imagine that whatever injury he's pointing to, they're seeing a vastly less severe version of that injury. That's what I would
Or it's
guess.
one they believe like could heal over time. There's something where like it's not as severe as you're saying.
Or just the fact that you never got the surgery, which
Exactly.
shows your intent
Well, that's
on
my
coming
thought
back.
process. That's my thought process as well, right? If it's such a severe injury that you can't play or it's hindering you from playing, wouldn't you have wanted to clean that up and clear that up heading
It,
into your off
if
season, not right when the season is
he
essentially
should have got
beginning?
that surgery when he got traded
That's
to
what
the
I mean.
Flyers,
That would have
right?
gave
He'd
credit
be healthy.
that would have gave, credit to kind of what he's claiming, but it's really the opposite at this point.
I'm sure they probably have been rehabbing it, right? So we let's not assume Kurt Overhart is an idiot, right? Like I'm sure they had a game plan
Of
for
course they
this,
did, yeah.
but something here smells fishy, dude. And it smelled fishy to us from the bird's eye view when
It
we
smelled
first.
fishy during the trade deadline, the
Right.
aftermath of that. So
Right. The fact that he wouldn't go to the minors and refuse, that was like the first warning sign. But like, I still stand by the fact that if
yeah.
you even got injured, right, and you did get your surgery, right, and you're like, you know what, I'm still getting paid. I'll go to the minors for you, or go to the minors and then get your surgery, right? Like
Yeah.
he did everything he could to make it more difficult for the Flyers. And that's where I think he's going to lose some kind of battle here. I think he will lose out on some of the money that he thought he was going to get.
Most likely. He thought this was a fail, not to say like a fail safe or like a foolproof way of getting paid that 8 million without
Right.
having to go to the minors. That kind of seems to me like that was the goal here. I
But
want to get
right.
paid my full contract, but I don't want to go to the AHL. I don't want to ride on that bus. I don't want to be in that situation, you know?
Right. And that is not up for you to decide, unfortunately, because you have a
Yeah. You're
contract
under contract.
and you don't have a no movement clause. Now, again, we don't know exactly what's going to happen here. I will say I am very happy. Usually I will not be this against players, but I do have bad juju about his faith, about like the way he's
Well, his
handling this.
actions are just kind of showing the
Right.
true character, right?
Typically, I wouldn't want to throw a player under the bus, but the Flyers are up against the cap. I want to see them get rid of this player. I want to see them get rid of this problem. I'm hoping that you're right and that if let's just say that they are able to do the buyout cost over 1 year, that would give them another 800K in cap space. They need a little bit more than that. But it's still managing to get the cap down. Like
Yeah.
they need to get rid of this cap space of a guy who refuses to play the role that they've assigned him to in this. I can understand why he's upset. I do understand that. Everybody's got an ego, but there are a lot of great players throughout time who have been in your situation and have reported to the minors.
Yeah, and handled it in a much more mature
Right.
way.
Right.
And I would say like the way he's handling it now, it kind of shows the character that he's not really willing to be a team guy.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I expect or at least my expectation of it is I would think this gets cleared up before the regular season begins. That's
Yeah.
my thought process. And I would be surprised, I think, if it's like a complete contract termination. But I guess it depends on the evidence they bring forth. Who
I
knows what they have in their back pocket if you're
yeah.
looking at it from a Flyers perspective. I would say expect some sort of settlement, though. That's probably
Yeah.
the safe bet here.
I think it will drag into the season. I think it might take the full 60 days or whatever that they
Yeah,
have.
it could be. They have that window, right? So
Right, because they have to build their own case. But I would what it does offer the Flyers, at least in the immediate, is that they can start the season under the cap.
with him technically terminated, yeah.
Right. Now they might have to pay something out. And again, this I'll go back to what I initially said. Do not expect the Flyers to go out and try to add players into this cap. They are going to use it as almost like it doesn't exist, but it does get them under the cap in the
It's to
short
cover
period.
their bonuses that potentially need to be paid out, right? So
Right, which again, it gets them under LTIR. They're not going to look to add additional players here. I think they're going to, unless that player is like a player they can waive, right, and send back down if something goes wrong. But they're going to approach this of like, we could come out on top here, but we also could get nothing, from it. The worst case scenario, which is nothing happens and you have to retain him, but that probably won't be the case here. Realistically, they probably will find some savings. Hopefully it's not for 2 years, like you're saying, Vasili. Um, Maybe he'll end up getting like 3 million from the Flyers and 3 million from Nashville. I could see that scenario too.
yeah.
But I definitely think he hurt his case more than he realized. And I think the NHL is the one that makes the final say. I don't know for sure, but the NHLPA does have power in this, and they by default will represent him to their best of their abilities. So
Yeah.
they'll look to get him money,
I'm
right? Like
assuming there's
for
some
sure.
sort of like third party arbitrator involved because the NHL and NHLPA are kind of battling off against each other because realistically, like
Figure there has to be.
he's like breaching and breaking the NHL CBA by doing whatever he's doing. So he's breaching their contract. The NHLPA is standing up for him. So yeah, like I said, I've never seen this happen before, and leave it to the Flyers to be one of the only teams that it happens to, right?
Yeah,
It's
it's
definitely a
funny.
funny one.
Yeah, I mean they're making headlines. I'm trying to look up to see what did um So yeah, okay. In Mike Richards' case, he got 1.32 million over the next 5 years.
Interesting. So that
Um,
got paid out over like a yearly basis. That
yeah,
was
another
LA, right?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he had a 5.75 million cap hit. I don't know for how many years. Yeah, I don't know for how many years. That was also the Slava Voinov situation
Yeah,
where
there's
he
something
was in
like that as
breach of con.
well.
Oh, okay. So yeah, he had 22 million left on the books. So 1.3. Let's just do this
Times
math real quick.
five.
Yeah. So what is that? It's gonna be like 8 million.
So he really, yeah, 6.5. So
1.3
he really
times
only
five.
got 6.5
Yes.
million. So he
Yeah.
really only got like a real small fraction
You
of the
got
whole.
30%.
Yeah. So maybe that's something to look at and say, hey, if you're going to some sort of settlement, some sort of arbitrator, like what's 30% of 4 million? I mean,
It's 1.2 million.
yeah. So if you look at that, like that's kind of about what we were saying, right? Like 1.2, 1.6.
So
So
I think there's a chance that Flyers might end up just giving him $2 million and then you fuck off.
it's
Pardon my
definitely
French.
possible. I'm interested to see what happens. Like I said, I think we're going to get some resolution here before the season. That's my thought process because I just don't think the Flyers want this kind of
I
lingering
hope
over
so,
them.
but I don't know if
But
that's up
we'll
to them.
see. Yeah, I guess. I think it might, maybe it depends on like when they grieve it and then when like
Right.
the arbitration date gets settled. So I'd imagine if you're the Flyers, the sooner the Johansson camp grieves it, then you can get some sort of arbitration date. But maybe their camp wants to wait till the last day to grieve it and fuck them and kind of have them going into the season with
Yeah.
this over their head. Who
Yeah.
knows, right? It's
Yeah.
totally possible. The way they've been operating to this point, like Johansson and Overhart, they've been looking to kind of fuck the Flyers over here. So I
Yeah.
would be surprised if they wait until day 59 to grieve it, and then you have to set up some sort of
I,
arbitration
I'll t-
date. Who knows how it
I'll tell
works?
you, man,
Like
if I was a GM looking from afar, I would be very weary of this agency moving forward. I know a lot of people haven't talked about that, but I'd be like, what
look
is
at the
going on?
way they're
Yeah.
trying to like backstab organizations and kind of
Like,
put them in bad
yeah,
positions. So
you allowed your one of your top like prospect signings to not even talk to the team that signed him and drafted him. Like
now you're doing this. Yeah.
your players are creating problems, right? And not every team is going to care, but some teams will. So there's a risk for everybody involved in this. But I think the Flyers are just they're playing hardball,
Yeah.
and this is business. And normally I wouldn't like it, but just with the actions of Johansson,
It's hard not
it
to. I
seems
think,
justifiable.
yeah, I think they're in a position to come out on top. Like I was saying before, if you're Philadelphia, like why would you be going this route if you didn't have the necessary evidence to prove your case when it does go to some sort of arbitration? So that's my thought process. But yeah,
Yeah.
like this is definitely something I wasn't expecting we were going to talk about after last week's episode. So
Yeah.
I'm excited that, we had a good segment on this and we can kind of break it down for everybody. But it's fun when it's kind of breaking news like this to go over it.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And yeah, again, we'll have updates on it over time. I'm sure there'll be some kind of updates,
I'm sure whenever there's some
over
sort of
time.
media availability with Danny Briere, this is going to be a big question to ask, most likely. So.
Yeah, you're right. I think it's going to come up consistently. People asking if there are any updates on it. It's going to be a distraction, but it won't be a distraction for the team on the ice.
Yeah,
And that's really what I care about, to be
it's more
honest
for
with
the
you.
front office to worry about in terms of
Yeah.
like negotiations.
Okay. Let's get into more fun stuff. So, the Flyers rookie series has been announced. Well, it's funny, we talked about it on the podcast. My sister's getting married. I'm like, I just know that something's gonna happen on that weekend. So my sister's getting married on September 14th, and of course, and I have the rehearsal dinner, which in our case is more of like a Shabbat dinner for Jews. Um, but the Philadelphia Flyers have announced their rookie series against the New York Rangers. This is actually really freaking awesome. September 13th at 7:05. That's a Friday. And then Saturday, September 14th at 5:05. So the Flyers rookie again, the I believe rookie camp starts the 10th. I don't remember 100%, but it does start that week. And the Flyers rookies will be facing the New York Rangers rookies. I do expect Matvey Michkov to at least play one of these games,
Oh, of
if not
course.
both.
I would
I,
expect probably both.
I
And
would expect.
my
I
thought process is look at the past and look at these rookie games. Like a lot of high-end prospects in the past have played both games. So
Yeah, and I
that's
think
my thoughts.
without Michkov having much experience on North American ice, I
Yeah, why
mean
not?
not ice, but you know what I mean, like the North American game.
Why not get him accustomed and get him those extra
Right,
reps, right?
right. I guess there's a risk of injury. And you really want to see him more in preseason than you do in rookie camp. But again, it'll be a big deal.
I'm sure they'll sell out if he plays both games, so that's also
Right.
a factor.
I think the Saturday one I think is in New York, right? And the Friday one is in Lehigh. Um,
I'm not too sure, but that would make
I
sense if it's a home and home type of
it
situation.
should be a home and home. I'm really excited for this overall. I don't know. Maybe Jet Luchenko might be involved in that as well. I wonder if they're going to pull some prospects in. Realistically, probably not. There's going to be plenty of Phantoms players that need to be playing there, but it would be cool if they did have some juniors players playing in there. I'm not anticipating it, but it would be cool if like Bonk and Barkey and Luchenko had a chance to play in this. But there are plenty of young talent for us to see.
I feel like Bonk and Barkey did play in some of these last seasons,
Yeah,
so
I
it
have a
wouldn't.
weird. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
He
I don't.
did, didn't
Yeah,
he?
pretty sure. So I don't think it's surprising. I just think it's NCAA guys that can't, that you
Yeah,
can't see
that's a
due
good
to
point.
like contract obligations and things
And
like that.
college, yeah. So
Yeah,
no bump, you know.
exactly.
But yeah, there's going to be obviously Massimo Rizzo is going to be a big name to watch, and yeah, looking forward to that one. The Flyers do
It's
typically do
really your
well in the rookie
first,
games, but
yeah, and it's really the first look at Mitchkov in a Flyers uniform, so
yeah,
people will be
and I'm gonna
excited.
miss both of them. I'm gonna have to watch
You're gonna
them.
be streaming it like while your sister's walking up the aisle.
I
You're
know.
gonna be like, "Oh my God, Mitchkov." No, not actually, but
I mean, hopefully it's. I don't know if it'll be on TV.
I'm
but
not
I'll definitely be
sure.
able to watch the
I
stream of it
feel like
afterwards.
the Flyers like website either usually live streams it or their
Just
YouTube or
well, just the fact that Mitchkov is playing in it, I feel like it could end up being on like so Service Electric is the company that does a lot of the Phantoms broadcasts. They
okay.
do like other locations in Pennsylvania. Like they're kind of like a smaller, more obscure
Maybe
cable network.
NBCSN picks it up and is like, we need
Right.
to
Or
show
sometimes the
this.
NHL network picks it up
Yeah.
when they have Phantoms games. So we'll see. Hopefully it is on TV. I suspect it might, just because Mitchkov is playing in it, and that's a pretty big draw for this type of game. And there's not going to be much other hockey of interest at this time. So we'll see. But I'm excited about that, and it's going to be awesome. And I think the last time there was a rookie this high end, well, we did have Nolan Patrick. I think he had a goal in his rookie game. But the famous one was JVR, who had 4 goals in his rookie game. I don't know if Mitchkov's going to put up 4 goals, but I definitely expect him to be on the scoring sheet, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's by far the best player in both of these games. So excited, really, really excited for that one. I suspect maybe they'll even be able to have Bjarnason in the game, which would be
It could be, yeah.
cool.
We'll have to see.
Yeah. Okay. The other update is on Kolosov. Now we still don't know anything for sure. I did double check before we started recording, just on Dynamo Minsk's website. No listing of Kolosov on there.
And their
So
training camp has started, I
yeah,
believe.
the training camp
So
has started. We did get an update, and Jamie Basca, shout out to Jamie Basca for tweeting this. But there was an update that Kolosov is listed on the training camp roster. Again, he was initially listed on the dev camp roster, and he didn't show for that. My gut instinct tells me that he is coming. We know, and again, shout out to Nasty Knuckles for this. They had an awesome interview with Danny Briere. They talked about more than just current Flyers. They talked like all about history. It was just so entertaining. I really
it was a
enjoyed it.
great, yeah, it was a great
Yeah.
episode to watch. If you
Yeah,
haven't checked it out,
I
definitely
wrote to
do it.
Riley about that one. I was like, dude, great interview. He did mention the Kolosov thing. Look, the reality is they are playing hardball with it. I don't really think they're that interested in letting him be in the KHL. I don't really think the KHL has much leverage if they want to do things respectfully. Sure, they could tell the Flyers to go kick rocks, but at the same time, Kolosov, you're still owned by the Flyers. You know, even if you don't play for us ever, we own your rights. The Flyers own your rights. So like you can't just go to another NHL team. Um, but it is interesting nonetheless. And I do expect to see Kolosov at training camp. We'll see. I think we're probably 1 week away from finding out for sure. But beginning of September, we'll probably know for sure if he's coming. So still a little bit more time. I think I'm probably optimistic about it. But I do expect him to come over. I think he needs to honor his contract. They already gave you an entire season. And I think even if he doesn't come, it's still not the end of the world. I think it's still salvageable, and and I've said this before, he could still come over the following year. I think it does hinder things a little bit for the Flyers. They have a plan. This is your year. You're the clear cut number 3. If you come here, again, any injury to a goalie, like
You're in
assuming
the
it's not in the
NHL,
very
yeah.
beginning of the season, yeah, if it's midway through the season, you're probably the call up guy. So I think it would be important for him to come here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, not much has really changed for me. I think from last week when we dissected it, like obviously he changed his agents. It's a huge, piece of news, and people want to point at that and say, "Well, look, he changed agents. He's
Oh,
obviously not
right. I
happy."
should have mentioned that.
Yeah, he's obviously not happy that with his other agent, maybe he like tried to have the other agent get out of the contract somehow, and he wasn't doing it to the best of his abilities, so this is why the new agent was hired. Like we really don't know the reasoning behind any of
Well,
this.
he did change to Matvey Michkov's agent,
Yeah, exactly. And
which
that's to me, I think that signals a good thing.
I
And
thought so too.
the reason being is, let's say you have this older agent or this prior agent. Maybe he didn't like the way the agent was kind of handling the relationship between him and the Flyers. Maybe he sees how smooth it's going in terms of the transition for Michkov coming over, and he thinks to himself, "Hey, maybe I should get the same agent that Matvey has." it seems to be going smooth for him, and he can kind of smooth things over for me in the way that I want it to be with the Flyers and make sure there's no bad blood between, his camp and the Flyers.
Yeah.
My thought process is this, and like you could listen to Danny Briere and Nasty Knuckles interview as well. I have the same exact thoughts. Like you have a legally binding contract with the NHL, with the Philadelphia Flyers organization that cannot be breached. He cannot just go and play in the KHL unless the Flyers either allow that by loan or they toll the contract. They do something. There has to be some sort of approval from the Flyers here for him to do that. So with that in mind and with that in play, I don't really care if he changed agents or not. Like the legal obligation is that he is a Philadelphia Flyer. He's property of the Flyers organization. He has to report. And it seems to me from the interview, that's the way the Flyers are kind of expecting it. That's what Briere is expecting as well. You have to understand, right? Like, let's say hypothetically, for some reason he doesn't come over, he tries to breach this contract, whatever, and all these kind of things come into play. You have to look at it and think, is any other team going to want to touch this guy after this, after all the trouble that he's made for the Flyers once this is all over?
But potentially, maybe not. To your point, because
But
he is
it doesn't paint you in a good
right.
light,
I
right?
agree.
As a
I agree.
player. So
I agree. I think again, this is just like the not the same as a Johansson, but it's like the same thing where like, hey, you're making deals, you need to honor the deal that you made, you know.
yeah,
I will say I like that the Flyers are not being nice. I know maybe that might not people might not agree with me on that, but it's like we can't be just taken advantage of and being like, we had plans, like even the Cutter Gauthier thing. It's like, dude, we signed you fifth overall, or we drafted you fifth overall. Like we invested in you, and then you treat us like that. It's like, no, we're not going to be bullied by players around the league, And again, I have the perspective as a GM. I'm not a player, okay? So I tend to side with GMs most of the time because I have that type of mindset where I'm like, this is a business. This is a business deal. Like we're paying you money. They paid him last year to play
exactly.
for another team, you know? Like you can't just walk away from deals because you're uncomfortable. The NHL is an uncomfortable place. Like
Yeah.
they have a plan for you to play as the starter in Lehigh. If you need additional, which is what I think this agent change is more about. I need the additional stuff that Matvey got. I
I need
want
the
my
additional
girlfriend.
support.
I
Yeah,
want my
exactly.
girlfriend to come with me. I want to know this.
And
I want that from
who
the
knows
team.
how
Fine.
hands-on who knows how hands-on that specific agent is with all this stuff. Maybe he's the one kind of driving all these things with the Flyers, right? Like who knows? He's the guy representing these players, looking at their
Yeah.
best interests. So maybe that's why he makes the switch, because he says, look at how he's handling the interests of these other players that are also Russian,
Right.
that are also kind of making the transition over. I want that same treatment, so let me like switch up and go with this new agent. And who knows what these other players on the Flyers might be saying to him, right? Like, how do you know if he hasn't had conversations with Michkov, with Zamula, with Fedotov, these other Russian players? So
Yeah.
I just think at this point there's a valid contract. If there was no contract in place, then I would say anything can really occur. But with the fact there's a contract, I just can't see him not showing up
Sure.
in this situation.
Yeah. Again, we might be wishful thinking here, but I think that's the best move for you is to get over here, start getting adapted. This organization believes in him as talent.
Exactly.
We
Yeah.
see him as a good goalie prospect. So I do want to bring up this other situation. So Yaroslav Askarov, the arguably the top goalie prospect in the world, definitely the one at the NHL level, plays for Nashville Predators. He has apparently, according to Kevin Weeks, demanded a trade.
Hmm.
So Nashville potentially was going to rotate up to this rookie, and UC Soros was going to be a free agent. They opted to sign Soros long term. This is kind of similar to the Brzgalov Bobrovsky situation, and now apparently Askarov wants out. The one thing I don't understand, he wants guaranteed NHL time. I'm like, okay, well, why not just play him as the backup? You get him 25. Most guys are not ready to take a full time role. I think he's like 20. How old is he? 22? He's
Yeah,
definitely
it
not. Yeah,
is.
he's 22 years old.
It is a strange situation. Like, why not just play him as the backup, show how talented he is, and then trade him for even
Yeah.
more in terms of assets? Because then at least teams can audibly point to an NHL sample size and say, hey, like, look how good he is in the NHL. I want to
Well,
acquire him.
so
Whereas now, I mean, his numbers in the AHL are off the charts, but like it's the
well,
AHL at the end of the day.
so his record is fantastic. He was 30, 13, and 1.
Yeah.
Okay. His numbers were pretty good. And now he had a 2.39 goals against and a 0.911 save percentage. These are pretty good
It's
numbers.
pretty good, yeah.
They're not superstar in the playoffs. He was 2 wins, 3 losses, 3.25 goals against, and a 0.882 save percentage. Again, I'm not going to jump on him because I do believe the team in front of you impacts that. He played 2 games in the NHL that year and was phenomenal, which is probably where all the excitement's coming. Yeah, he only started 1 game, he won it. He had a 1.47 goals against and a 0.943 save percent. I mean, that's fantastic. But that's a very
Still, it's only two
small,
games,
right? A
yeah,
very small
right.
sample size. Do I believe this guy is probably a stud? Yeah, probably. Again,
I
he
mean,
was
from what I've
drafted
seen of
11th overall.
Askarov, because I've seen a little bit of him play, like in just things like that. Like he definitely seems like a goalie that has all the tools to be one of the future next elite goaltenders, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Well, I will say this. If I were the Flyers, I would be interested in trading for this guy. I
Of
don't know what it
course.
would take. I saw a lot of people talking about how trading Sam Ersson for him. I'm not that interested in that situation.
I would look to trade Kolosov and something else for him.
So that was what I was saying. Like, could you package, and Kolosov alone would not get the job
No,
done, but
definitely not.
Kolosov, one of your other later first round picks, like the Edmonton pick potentially, for a guy like Askarov, they might be asking for more. I don't think they really want to trade him. But again, if he's demanding a trade,
Where's the
frankly,
leverage?
he
Yeah.
can't do that anyway. He's under an
But Nashville
ELC
has no leverage now that they know that he's
in a
asking out.
in a
So
trade, right? The value of him slightly goes down. He's not worth nothing, obviously, but that's where I was like, maybe there is an opportunity for be like, hey, how about you guys aren't ready to put Kolosov in the NHL or whatever yet? Anyway, you'll retain this guy's rights. He's a pretty good young goalie. We'll give you a first round pick. You can take another crack at a goalie again in this upcoming draft. That's kind of how I was playing. Maybe you have to sweeten it even a little bit more just because he was a
it's
number 11
interesting.
pick. I'm just saying it's an option. I don't know if it's enough. I would be interested in Askarov. I think you'd have to be stupid to say you'd have no interest in him. But I'm not interested in getting rid of Samuel Ersson. I think I have seen enough from Ersson. I don't really care about his numbers. I've seen enough from Ersson to be like, okay, he has potential to be a top 15 goalie in this league. And right now, Askarov has not proven that either. He's not even proven what Ersson. Maybe he will be better. But there's no guarantee of that. He could also be just as good as Ersson at the
Yeah.
end of the
I
day.
think with goalies, in a sense, it can always be a crapshoot until they make it to the NHL and actually show what's happened. Like how many good goalies were appointed to be like the next elite goalie or the heir to somebody else, and then they make it to the NHL and they just fall flat in their face. Like it's happened multiple times in the past. Like I always look to Justin Pogge with the Leafs. Like he was supposed to be the next big thing. Stellar numbers at the World Juniors, came into the NHL, got lit up, never found his game at the NHL
Yeah.
level. Like sometimes it can happen. Personally, I'm on the same page. Like I don't think you trade Erston in this situation because he's more established. So realistically, he should have more trade value at an NHL level.
The
Um,
but you still run into a problem because you have Kolosov here. You don't want to disrespect Kolosov. It's not a good look. You brought the guy over, made him leave
yeah,
his life. You gave him a bunch of money. So I don't anticipate the Flyers will be involved in a trade for this. I'll say
neither
that
do
first and
I,
foremost.
but I think they should be interested just based on their goalie situation. Like I think they should be interested in kick tires, but I
How
don't
can you
think
not be interested on a player of this caliber being
exactly right.
available,
So
potentially being available? Because quite frankly, I'm not 100% convinced that he will get traded. Just
yeah,
because he
well,
demanded a trade doesn't mean he's getting one.
we'll definitely see. Like we've seen players demand trades in the past and not happen for years. So who knows? But I just think like they'll probably kick tires. I wouldn't expect the Flyers to be at the forefront, but I mean anything can happen. So something to
And
keep an eye out for.
and this also could be a situation where like, look, you might not be traded in the beginning of the year. He might be starting off in camp. He might win out the number 2 job. And then, like you said, he gets traded for better value later on in the season for a team. There are teams out there that need a goalie.
Maybe at the trade deadline, exactly.
Right, but there are teams that might be willing to invest more at a later point. They found out the guy they invested in it isn't who they thought that he was going to be. Maybe it's the Flyers, right? Maybe Ersson doesn't have a great season. The Flyers are like, man, we really need a goalie, you know? So I don't know exactly. I'm not convinced that he's going to be traded right now, just because the Nashville holds the cards. I mean, he still has to report to the AHL team. I guess with a Russian player, you do risk that he could go back to Russia and not report to camp. But no way this guy doesn't want to be an NHL goaltender. He probably wants to follow in the Vasilevsky,
Yeah.
Shesterkin, Sorokin path, right? He is on that caliber as far as a prospect. And he's already shown success in North America. So I don't think he's going for cheap or anything like that. I think it's still going to take a nice package to get him out of there. I think their leverage is hurt a little bit by it, but not like I just don't think they're going to be rushing to get rid of him. I think it's a little silly though to not be like we're going with Soros and Askarov as our goalies this year. Who's their backup? I forget.
I'm not too sure on that, but let's check it out here.
Do, 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 do. It's Kevin Lankinen.
Yeah, that's a little strange to me why you wouldn't want to have Askarov as a backup. Like maybe they see, oh, we want him to start every night or something because it's a goalie. So I kind of
Sure.
understand that.
Yeah,
But
but
I think you want to give him a taste of the NHL and see what he can do at that level.
yeah, I mean,
And
you
Saros isn't going to play every single game either. So
well, Soros played 64 games last year. Dude, you take him down to 60
take him down to even
and you
55 or
yeah,
something. Yeah.
right. Again, I would at least be like, well, you're going to start off as our backup. Now I can see why he can be like, well, there's no hope for me here long term, but it's like, but we'll figure something out for you, you know? Don't put us in this position where we have to trade you now. Let's get you into the NHL. Let's get you playing, right?
And then
Let's get you playing NHL games. You're going to start, I don't know, 30% of the season. You know, maybe if Soros goes down, you're playing more than that, right? And then, you know, we'll see if, you know, we'll see if we can work out a deal to get you out of town.
yeah,
I understand why a team that's competing for a Stanley Cup doesn't want to ride a rookie to do that. Um, you know, but I also don't understand why they're opting for, you know, an average backup rather than your top tier prospect and be like, well, you're going to be in the NHL this year.
yeah, it's
You know?
confusing. Like the whole situation is confusing. Maybe he wants to be a starter. Like I'm not too aware. I
Yeah, but
haven't looked
who
into
gives a
it.
22-year-old? I guess he's a special case because he's a high
Yeah,
end, you know, asset. But
but who really knows? Like
it's
I,
so rare for
it's
a
gonna be
22-year-old to
it's gonna
demand to be
be
a starter.
really yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how it unfolds. I agree. So we'll
Even
see.
yeah, even Sorokin didn't come to the NHL till he was 24. So it's
Hmm.
like, you know, you're
Maybe
still a
there's some sort of
couple years away
ego
from that.
involved or something like that. Like it's hard to tell, right? When you're not there behind the scenes to hear the conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. So the other, I guess, so the Flyers, going back to Kolosov, the Flyers do have a potential contingency again, for Kolosov. And this one comes from Bill Meltzer that it's not confirmed, but there is speculation that the Flyers will be inviting A2, whoo,
Mac and Yemi.
Makanyemi, thank you. To camp on a PTO. He was drafted fourth round by Nashville, ironically. No, I'm sorry. I'm
Carolina. Yeah.
looking at the wrong player. Yeah, fourth round by Carolina. I had his.
Yeah, fourth round by
Oh, here he is.
Carolina,
Yep.
104th overall,
Yep.
2017 NHL draft.
25-year-old goalie, 6'2". Um, has some AHL experience, a little bit of NHL experience. Actually had good numbers playing for the Sharks. Bad numbers in the
906.
ECHL.
Yeah, 906 save percentage with the Sharks, 213 goals against.
Looks like his
It
game potentially dropped off.
maybe, but I will preface that with if you're in the ECHL and you look at goalie numbers, they're usually not good across the board.
Fair
Like the
enough.
defense is terrible in the
But his
ECHL.
his
Um,
AHL numbers got worse too, which
no,
is
they did get worse, but I
kind
mean,
of not much,
I
but
mean, he had like a 900 save percentage the last couple years in the AHL, and 296 GAA, 3.14 GAA this in the 2023-24 season. I mean, you got to factor in he was playing for San Jose, who's terrible. So imagine how bad their AHL team. Like, I
Right.
don't think being a goalie for San Jose's AHL team is probably a fun experience.
His
Um,
well,
or their ECHL team for that matter.
his
So
his numbers with the Chicago Wolves, he played 14 games. Those were promising.
yeah,
206 goals against and a .922, which again, like when you look at Askarov's numbers, again, this is in 14 games, but he was 11-2-1. I think at one point he was a promising goaltender, and
seems like it. Yeah.
yeah, but he's also only 25. So I think this seems like a backup plan to
This is
Kolosov
the
not coming
Kolosov
over.
fall through. Yeah. Like if he
Yeah.
doesn't come over, we have this extra goalie, add him into our depth chart. Kind of like what we talked about last week, right? Like if he doesn't come over, you need to have somebody to be
And
able to
this
replace him.
this seems like it's going to be the guy. If potentially, I don't know for sure. Could be the guy if Kolosov doesn't come over. That's why the Petrozuli signing, Keith Petrozuli, like that guy was signed like a month ago. So that was just announced recently. But like both of those signings with the Phantoms that we mentioned last week, they were already done. So um, they were just like announced recently. So you know, take it for what it's worth. But the Flyers do seem to have some kind of backup plan there in mind. I'm honestly kind of interested to see if this guy has any skill.
It's
Um,
possible. I mean, Finnish goaltender. I like what I
Only
hear.
25. Yeah.
Exactly. He had some decent numbers in the SM Liga as well, like a 936 in 7 games, and then a 907 in 34 games.
Playing on clearly bad teams
Yeah,
in Liga.
that's the
So,
thing with goalies that's tough because you could be a great goalie, but if your defense is bleeding breakaways and 2-on-1s every night, like you look like trash on paper.
well,
So,
that's why scouting is more important than our surface level analysis.
mhm.
Again, I hope that Kolosov is the guy in net, but I like that the Flyers are at least loading up on goalies and looking for other options. They're not
They're
like
being proactive, so
yes,
it's a good thing.
and that is a good thing. Yeah. So let's go on to the next topic. So Tortorella was just named assistant coach to Team USA. Mike Sullivan is the head coach. This is for the Four Nations tournament
Mhm.
that they will be having this year instead of sending their players to the Olympics. Only four teams playing in it, and it's USA, Canada, Finland, and Sweden. Um, Not surprising. Tortorella is one of the best coaches in the league, despite what the fan base jumps on him
It's
for.
funny too, Yariv, as well, because Sullivan was Tortorella's assistant in
Assistant.
Tampa, New York, Vancouver, and now like
Well, he
it's
probably picked Tortorella.
oh, of course, and but now it's just the roles are reversed. So I just thought that's really funny. And
I
there's been
imagine he's going to coach the
rumblings,
D also.
yeah, most likely, and there's been rumblings too, like maybe when Tortorella hangs it up with the Flyers, is Mike Sullivan a candidate in the future? Obviously, I
Sure.
mean he's still with the Penguins now, but you have to imagine that can't last forever. So.
Yeah, I think he'll be there as long as Sidney Crosby's there, but
It's a good
because I
way to
think
look at
Crosby
it.
likes him a lot. But we'll see.
Yeah.
The question is, will there be any other Flyers part of that tournament? I think it's a little too early to say,
It's hard, yeah,
because
to
there are
tell.
no real locks on the Flyers. I think Sam Ersson definitely is in the conversation for Sweden, depending on the type of season he has. Again, he was picked for the IIHF team.
Yeah.
I think there is a chance that if he has a great season this year, I mean, for all we know, he could end up being the starter, depending on what kind of season he ends up having. I think Travis Konecny is not a lock, but he's in the mix
For Canada, yeah.
for Canada. I think Joel Farabee will be in the mix for Team USA, but I think Team USA will probably be too good. Unless
That's
Farabee
my
breaks
thoughts.
out,
Yeah.
if he has a breakout year, it's possible, but I think USA, there's a good chance that they're going to be a little too good
I mean,
for him
Cam
to make
York
it.
could be maybe a dark horse
Cam York, yep,
for the US team. They are stacked on defense, so we'll see. But if he
right.
has a huge first half, you never know because he's been playing on US national teams his whole career. So they usually try to like keep those same guys in the fold. And I think one too that I think people probably aren't thinking of or aren't aware of is Rasmus Ristolainen. Like
Oh yeah, Sweden
he plays
or
for
Finland.
Finland, probably or has played for them probably at like every major tournament the last 10
I
years or
I
so.
think
So
maybe he might be the closest thing to a lock,
yeah,
ironically.
exactly.
Just because Finland's D is not as they play a really good team defensive game, but they are not usually not full of like superstars on the back end. So it becomes a little bit more feasible
Yeah. And
Let
he's
me
been a lock for years for Finland on their national team. Like the only other really high end Finnish defenseman, like obviously Miro Heiskanen is going to be their bread
yeah.
and butter. But other than that, I don't really think of anybody that
I
comes to
mean,
mind.
Sean Couturier in the past, pre-injury, I think would have been a lock for fourth line
Fourth
center
line, yeah, I was going to
on
say
Team
fourth line
Canada.
PK specialist, but
But again, it depends on what kind of season he
his
has.
age at this point and injury
Right.
history,
There's a
who
good
knows?
chance he's going to be skipped over. Travis Sanheim would have to take another jump. So unlikely. Owen Tippett would have
I
to make
mean,
a big jump to be
Carter Hart
included.
would have been
Carter
probably a
Hart,
goalie for
you
Canada,
know,
but
it's funny. I was listening to SDPN and they were talking about how bad the goaltending situation is for Canada right now, and they're like, who would be the top goalie for Canada? It would be Carter Hart. That is your best Canadian goalie in the world
that's who it
right
would
now.
have been, yeah, in this
Yes.
situation. But obviously, we know what has happened, so that's not
Yeah.
the case.
And obviously, no Team Russia involved. I do think there's a chance Matvey Michkov would have made that team,
Oh, probably.
assuming they would have been part of this tournament. But we know that they will not be.
Yeah.
Getting kind of silly at this point to continuously not include Russian players in the
Well, it's not
NHL.
like they're the ones starting this conflict, so
Right.
it's
And they
kind of
live in
like you're
America.
punishing them for no reason at this
They live
point.
in America
But yeah,
and Canada. They don't
I
even live
mean,
in Russia.
it'll be interesting now to just see what Flyers players make it, but I
Ivan
mean,
Fedotov would even be
probably.
too many good
Well,
Russian goalies in
oh
this league.
yeah, I mean,
Too many.
think
Just
about
Sorokin,
Sorokin,
Vasilevsky, and those are they're
Shesterkin are the
yeah, like
locks
the
already,
best
so
goalies in the league are Russian. So I don't think Fedotov, unless he comes in and he like takes over Erson's spot and he's putting up ridiculous numbers. I mean, I
yeah,
guess
yeah.
it's possible, but I highly unlikely. I think those are pretty much it, dude.
Yeah,
Um,
we've named them out, that's for
it'd be a
sure.
hilarious one, which I don't think will happen at all. But if like Nick Sealer somehow makes Team USA,
Oh my God. I don't see that happening, but
as like
I
no,
mean, if
no.
he's maybe as like the eighth or ninth defenseman or
Yeah.
something,
I think Travis Sanheim, if he plays the way he played to start the season and he plays that
I
way
could
all
see
year
maybe like a
round,
seventh defenseman or something.
yeah. But I think it's also unlikely. I think we named the likely ones. I think Farabee is the only one. I guess there's a case that Tyson Forrester completely explodes this year. I don't think it's
I
going to
don't see
happen.
it though, because there's just so
He's
many
too
good
young.
Canadian forwards and he's too young. They're just gonna
Yeah.
pass right over him.
The only one I thought is like maybe Farabee
He
if this is
really
like
needs
a
to have a
breakout
huge
year.
season for that.
Right.
Yeah.
If
He's
he
got to
like
be
puts
a
up
point a
80
game.
points.
Got to be a point a
Right.
game. And
But
and yeah. I
so
think
so realistically it's like Erson, Konecny
Risto.
and
And I
Risto.
think Risto's probably the likeliest of those three, even. Him and Konechny, maybe.
I think Konechny, if he does what he did last year or better, I think he has a real shot. And I think I
Yeah.
don't like who are the good. Hold on, I want to look this up.
I think the big thing is gonna be for Konechny that's gonna help him is his shorthanded prowess, like his new shorthanded
Sure.
style of play where he's kind of leading the league in shorthanded goals. He's playing a big factor on the PK. That's what's gonna make him attractive. It's hard to just be like a player that's only good at 5-on-5, for example, and make one of these teams. You got to be either a power
So
play guy or a PK guy. So
here are the goalies for Sweden.
mhm.
Jacob Markstrom, probably, right?
Yeah.
Linus Olmark, probably. Then it's Anton Forsberg, Philip Gustafson, Sam Ersson.
Yeah, he has a possibility to be that third guy, I think,
Yeah.
for sure.
There really is nobody else. Like he is in the mix for number three with Forsberg, Gustafson, and Ersson
And you never
and
know what's
Ersson
going to
and
happen with injuries, right? If one of these goalies gets injured, that pushes you up the depth chart.
yeah.
So,
I mean there are some names here, but realistically, I think Ersson, Gustafson, and Forsberg are probably
the
uh
three in the mix for that
yeah
third
for
spot.
that
Yeah.
third spot. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. It all depends on how well the Flyers do this year or how well Ersson does this year.
Yep.
But it would be cool if he was the Swedish goalie. Having said
Good
that, it's
experience. Good
kind of a
experience.
benefit that the Flyers don't have players in this tournament
Well, yeah,
because
it helps them with their
it's just a
push
week
to
off.
the playoffs or whatever they're trying to do at that point in the season. So, that's the risk sometimes. You send these guys to these tournaments, they could even get hurt. So
I gotta say, a 4 team tournament is kind of lame.
it's kind of a waste of time, in my opinion. But
Yeah,
yeah.
but
Well, it's
You
like
know,
you've almost just like awarded a team a bronze medal.
well, it would be cool if they had like that Team North America thing going
They
again, where
should
they
have
have the young
added them for
stars,
this, I
or
think.
like a young stars team in general.
Yeah.
You know, like guys under 24,
You
under
get like a
23.
Bedard in there, all those young
Bedard,
Michkov.
Michkov,
Yeah,
Gautier.
it'd be fun.
Um, yeah, it would be really cool to see. Like Will Smith,
And the young guys, like if you've
Celebrini,
heard any players from that,
Cole
like,
Caulfield.
yeah, if you've heard any players from that like North American young team or whatever they was like a couple of years back, I
It
forget
was
the
a ridiculous
official
team.
name. Ridiculous team. But I mean, like those players, if you heard them talk in interviews, they said like they really wanted to win that and like prove that they were on like the
They were
echelon
talented.
of
Well, didn't they have
echelon.
like well, they
Yeah.
had like Nathan McKinnon, what's his
Matthews,
Matthews,
McDavid. It was a
McDavid,
no, but those guys said like I watched some
Coots was
interviews.
fourth line center.
Yeah, I watched some interviews and they basically said like we were like very motivated to try to win that tournament and show like we were the next like up and coming
And
stars.
and then they
So I
had
think you get some real good play out of a team like that.
yeah, and they had the all European team, which ended up going to the finals,
Yeah.
which like why didn't they do that this year? Like I feel like that would have been really cool to do
It would have been, yeah.
like just a collection of European players
I
that
mean, how can we expect the NHL to market the game in a smart way that makes it
but
exciting
they
for
did it the
fans?
first time and those teams were two of the most exciting teams.
But like I said, how can we continually expect them to do that? Usually
Right.
they shoot themselves in the
Cuz
foot
like think
every
of,
chance they get with
think
this
about that
stuff.
Euro
So
team with like Tim
yeah,
Stützle on it
it was
and
fun.
Dreisaitl. You know, like those two names alone, top
I'm
two
not
centers.
I'm not surprised, Yariv, by what the NHL is doing. They're making it the most plain but boring vanilla tournament that it
Yeah.
possibly can be with these four teams.
Yeah, because they
But
don't want it. They don't want the
yeah,
tournament in the middle of the season.
exactly.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on to our last few topics here. So just want to remind everybody to please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you listen this far. Hit the notification bell for notifications on the channel. Follow us on iTunes and Spotify and give us a rating there as well. Okay, so some NHL news. We'll talk a little bit about the Patrick Laine trade. He was rumored to be traded. He wanted out of town. He was in the players' assistant program, had a down year, seemed to be not happy in Columbus. Seemed like some of the players didn't want him in the locker room also. My guess is that he comes with some kind of headache. Now, having said that, some players that have this reputation do much better in other cities. Like Johansson did not, but there are examples of things working out.
Yeah, I could turn it
Um,
around, right?
yeah, like Jonathan Drouin in Colorado. Obviously, there with his friend Nathan McKinnon, and that worked out for him. But Patrick Laine was traded, full cap hit. I think it was like 8+ million. I forget
Yeah,
exactly
he's
the
like
number.
8 point something million.
Like I think similar contract to Konecny. But he was traded along with a second round pick to the Montreal Canadiens for Josh Harris. So interesting trade. I think it's a good move for Montreal. They're one of the bottom teams in the league. They need scoring. They added a very talented scorer. Doesn't do much well outside of scoring. But again, if they're bringing him in for that role, former second overall pick, has produced above 40 goals, especially early in his career, does have the ability to be a point per game player. I think it's going to make them a more dangerous team. I don't know how this will play out for them. Good on for Columbus for not eating any cap. They're clearly going for a top pick in this draft this year. Sucks they had to give up a second round pick to get rid of Laine. I don't think this is ideally how they wanted things to play out when they signed him. But at least it's behind everybody. I think Montreal fans are pretty excited about it. I think Columbus fans are probably happy that at least it's over. And they'll look to move on. But I think Laine can work. We'll see how he does there. It kind of reminds me of like bringing in Mike Hoffman, only he's better scorer than Mike
Yeah.
Hoffman. So it could work. I mean, if he scores 35 plus 40 goals, it's a win for them. You know, plus they get a second round pick. So I think it's a high, I don't want to say high risk, but it's a risk reward type of trade that could definitely pay off in Montreal's favor.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, when you look at the trade for Montreal, I don't really see like the risk for them other than the contract. Like, I mean, he has a pretty substantial cap hit at 8.7 million. So they're banking on the fact that he's going to get back to being a 30 goal scorer annually for the foreseeable future, right? Like, that's their thought process. Hey, we got this guy, he's going to come in and score 30 plus goals every season, playing with either Kirby Doc or with Nick Suzuki. I think that's the kind of the plan. And I mean, I would imagine with the way he plays defensively, the goal will probably be, to have him with Suzuki, just because Suzuki's kind of more of that, defensive stalwart in a sense, where I would say that if you look at, Laine and the way he plays, there's really not a lot of defense to
No.
his game whatsoever. It's kind of just,
Maybe
straight.
playing with Suzuki potentially,
Yeah,
and
that's what I
off
thought,
field.
right? He'd probably play with Suzuki, get
Suzuki's
that
very good
defensive.
defensively. Yeah.
Yeah, that defensive prowess. So yeah, like I think for Montreal, it's kind of telling to the fact that I think like they had to pay, or the Blue Jackets had to pay an extra second round pick. It's kind of telling that the league and teams around the league weren't really itching to trade for this guy. So it kind of shows maybe this is one of his last chances in a sense, because he's already been on Columbus, didn't work out with Winnipeg before that. This is a third team in a pretty short amount of time. So I think for Laine in his career, he's probably gonna have to really turn it around here just to ensure that he can get a contract going forward. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. We'll see how it plays out for them. I'm sure they're more excited about it than we are. And speaking of something people are more excited than I am, so the St. Louis Blues got their players. Again, they put up offer sheets from Edmonton for uh, Ryan Holloway and Phil Broberg. They had to essentially give up their second and their third round pick for this year, so they only have 3 picks in this upcoming draft. I guess they could change that. They have their first, their fifth, and their sixth. They overpay 2 players. Having said that, they are on a 2-year deal, so nothing that could hurt their organization long term or something if it doesn't work out. Both young players, so I think it's a risk that's not bad.
a 2 year
Overall,
risk in a
it's a
sense.
2-year risk. But Edmonton letting them walk should kind of let people know that they severely overpaid these players. It's typically what these are about. I wouldn't like these type of moves from the Flyers. I'll say that. They did fill out their team. They're not a team that's probably, they might not even make the playoffs, and they have no draft capital
Yep.
right now. But they did at least invest in young guys. So if it works out, it's a home run. Um, Again, they kind of both need to work out for it to be like a killer move. But I guess they better hope that Broberg works, because he's being paid like a legitimate top 4 defender, and he has never played that way in his short pro career. So we'll see. We'll see how it uh how it plays out for them.
Yeah.
Um,
I just think for St. Louis, like they are taking a 2 year risk, essentially, like I stated. If you look at what they're doing, they're trying to take away 2 players that they think have probably more potential than Edmonton might have been unearthing, just with like how they're placed in their depth chart, how they're placed on their roster, things like that. So St. Louis is banking on, Broberg or Holloway to break out even further, right? Over these 2 years, and then kind of sign again afterwards. For Edmonton, I think it shows the fact they didn't match that maybe St. Louis is overvaluing how effective these guys can really be. I guess one thing to look at it from St. Louis's perspective too is, does this weaken Edmonton's depth because you took these 2 players away from them? So it could be a strategical move in the sense that not only did we take 2 guys that we think have more potential, could get better, but we also fucked Edmonton and stole 2 of their players, and now they're not as good as they were last season. So I don't know if
yeah,
that's a strategical type of move that they're trying to pull off. I mean, from the way Edmonton handled it, it doesn't seem like they think it's a big deal. Obviously, not
yeah,
matching. So we'll see how it unfolds. But I think out of both the guys that they acquired, Holloway or Broberg, I think Broberg has the higher potential to put
sure.
to fill out and maybe be that top 4 guy. Holloway, I'm not sure that he's ever going to be more than a third line player at this
Yeah.
point.
I really don't understand the move that much, to be honest with you. But I guess in their mind, they're better players that they could probably would end up drafting in again, they have a pretty decent team. They're not like a
Yeah.
bad team.
So
They're
these
like a
could be good
playoff
depth
bubble team.
additions.
Yeah,
So
so maybe they think that this will make them a playoff team if these guys work out. Um, so we'll see. Time will tell. Again, I don't like this move for my team. Not on players like this. Um, but then there's also like the Ryan Kessler situation where the Flyers tried to grab Ryan Kessler back in the day, and if they would have won that one out, it would have paid off dividends because Ryan Kessler ended up breaking out, but
well,
he was
imagine
already
Kessler and Mike Richards on the team
right.
and
Yeah,
the
yeah,
centers. Like, think about a nightmare of like defensive centers matching up against you in the most perfect way.
absolutely.
Like that would have been a crazy stack for a team to go against.
Yeah,
Like top three of Richards, Carter, Kessler. Like fuck, Briere, mix Briere in there.
that
Like
would have been wild.
pretty much.
So, okay, our last bit, and we'll end on this. So, there was a survey that went out to Russian media,
Sports Express, yeah.
Sports Express, thank you. Essentially, what they did is they did a vote for your top three prospects, Russian prospects that played in the Russian Pro League, or played in any of the Russian leagues over there. So the MHL, VHL, KHL. And they kind of did a point system where you got a certain amount of points for first overall, second overall, and third overall. I don't have the entire list in front of me. It's kind of annoying. But Matvey Michkov did win top Russian prospect. I did see that Demidov actually got one more first overall vote than Michkov, but had vastly less second overall picks. So either like they were high on Demidov and they picked Michkov as number two, or they picked Michkov and didn't pick Demidov as number two, which
Yeah.
I saw some other outlets pick there are other players who were voted first overall. Kind of weird to be honest with you. I think Michkov probably should have dominated this list, but Michkov did end up winning the best Russian prospect as voted by the Russian media. So that was pretty cool. And a slight update on Demidov. He did come out publicly saying that he was the 13th overall striker for his team. Again, that's a translation. So he's the 13th forward on Dynamo Minsk, or I'm sorry, on
Ska.
St. Petersburg. So for all those Hab fans that keep thinking that like Michkov was some kind of problem, they're doing the exact same
This
thing
is
to
not,
Demidov.
yeah, this is not out of the ordinary with young
And
players in the KHL. We've seen
right,
it many years.
this is what
Um,
they do.
just to break it down, like Michkov had 114 points for first, Demidov had 100 points for second. And then Anton Saleyev was third, and that's not too surprising in terms of the best U20 players.
Yeah,
And 60 people took part in the survey. So that's leading reporters, commentators, and bloggers of Russia. So these are guys that have watched these players play. So the voting is actually like, not to say it's entirely accurate, but at least you have commentators and media voting on this who actually watch these guys versus scouts or prospect writers that might have watched them for like 5 games or something.
yeah. Well, it was interesting nonetheless. It's almost completely irrelevant.
But it's fun to tout up Michkov, right, as being
Yeah,
number one here
that's
once
really
again.
all it was.
So
Yeah. We'll see how he does, at least in those rookie games. So I'm excited about that. All right, that's the end of our show. Vasili, you got anything to add?
no, I'm gonna actually be kind of gearing up some season preview stuff, like projections for
Cool.
certain Flyers younger players, probably over like the month of September. So just keep an eye out for that on Flyers Nitty Gritty. I'm gonna dive into some of the younger players on the team and what I think they might be able to produce this season.
Sounds good, man. Looking forward to it. Again, thank you everybody for listening, guys. Remind you to like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Hit the notification bell for notifications. Follow us on iTunes and Spotify for the audio version, and give us a rating there if you can. And shout out to our sponsors, Jim Steaks at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak from Jim Steaks. Shout out to Public Summit Adjusters, 215-752-0560. Again, Summit Public Adjusters, 215-752-0560. And also shout out to Sports Spider, their aggregator of sports information. overall NHL information and Flyers content. Make sure to check them out. The link is in the description. All right, we're getting close to the Flyers season, or at least training camp. Looking forward to it. We love you guys, and remember, always stay green.